In this lesson, we'll take a look at using a cloner to create sort of a letter explosion to kind of kick off our broadcast piece. So I want to do it kind of over here on the lower left hand side. And so let's create a new cloner. So we'll go to MoGraph, cloner, and I'm going to call this something like explode cloner. I want to also have the letters underneath this cloner. So I'm going to go ahead and just grab the letters here, and I'm going to control drag them underneath the explode cloner. So making a copy of those. So now we have our explode cloner here. You can turn off your background letters if you want to. And let me just take a look at this. So what I want to do is set up sort of a round shape almost. And so I'm going to go into the explode cloner, and let's turn this mode from linear to a grid array. And the form, I want to change it from cubic to sphere. Okay, and so you can see it sort of creates this little sphere shape. I want to increase the count to 10 or 12 in all directions. And dial this up here. Okay. And now you can see it sort of makes this packed sphere shape, which I can expand in all directions. Okay, so I want the letters to sort of explode out of this central spherical kind of shape. And so let's go ahead and take this size down. And at the initial, we want to actually animate this. So I want to have a period of rapid expansion, and then I want to have a period of slower expansion. And I also want to add some randomization to this. So let's go ahead and animate this first, and then we'll add some randomization. So at frame 0 here, I want this to actually be very small. So I'm going to go ahead and decrease this amount in all directions. Okay. So something like that. And I'll take the cloner and sort of move it over kind of right about there. Okay. And then I can go ahead and key the size at frame 0. So I'll key the size here. And then at frame 4, I want it to expand really rapidly. So at frame 4, I'm going to expand this up. So maybe 400 in all directions. And maybe in this case we'll make it 500. And we'll set that and key it. And then I want it to slowly expand over the course of the rest of the piece. And so then I'll take this to something like 700. Let's make it 720. Okay, at frame 150. So it's going to expand really quickly and then very slowly. Okay, so you can see that. Now I want to add some randomization to it. Okay, so again, we go to effectors, and let's go ahead and add a random effector. Now if you don't have it added, you can always just come in here and drag it in to your effectors. So I'm going to go ahead and modify the scale uniformly and the rotation. Okay. And now I'll modify this rotation in every direction. Okay. The scale I'll modify a little bit as well. Now this randomization isn't keyed right now, but we can key it as we go. So I think the letters maybe are a little bit too big right now. So I'm going to go into the cloner, and let's go ahead and go to transform. And I'm going to set this scale to something a bit smaller so that all these letters are sort of scaled down a little bit. Okay. Now I want to go into the randomization, and as we come out here, I want to sort of set the end result. And so we'll go into random parameters. I'm going to increase the X, Y, and Z values. And let's go ahead and key those values. And then the scale, I'll go ahead and increase that scale so they get gradually larger. And then we can go ahead and key the rotation. So I think the rotation is going to be fine here. And if you want to expand this a little bit more, you can. Just don't forget to key it. Okay. Now as you come down, we can come down here to our immediate expansion. We can start to take this random factor down a little bit. Okay. We can also take the scale factor down a bit. And also maybe the rotation factor. And key all those values. Okay. Now going down all the way to the bottom, I want to take this down to 0 because I want it to be a nice tight ball. So I'm going to take everything down to 0. The scale I'll leave at 1. And then I'll key everything. So you can see we get an initial, hopefully you can kind of see that. Let me go ahead and go into the default camera and show you kind of a closer look at what that looks like. And let me take this, and on the initial random, I'm going to go ahead and set this to something a bit smaller. So you can kind of see we get an initial explosion there. Okay, initial explosion, and then it sort of keeps expanding but more slowly. So almost like a kind of a time shifting kind of thing where it continues to expand slowly. And I think it maybe doesn't do it quite enough, so we can always come in here, use randomization to kind of pull that scale out a little bit. You can also go into your cloner and go into object, and if the size isn't quite big enough, you can increase that size here. Just don't forget to key it. So take that up to 750 and key that. And if you come back down here to 4 and maybe it's not quite big enough, then you can always increase those values and rekey them. Control click to key. And now we get this sort of exploding, expanding sphere almost of letters. Now they're not really rotated that much, so you could come in here with your randomization and maybe modify that rotation a little bit. There's not a ton of rotation going on there. And so we can go ahead and increase the amount of randomization with our letters here. So maybe something like that. Key those. So we get more of a random look, so they're not all sort of facing up and down. Okay, and over here, I'll go ahead and continue that. Okay, so you can play around with those values. The key is a quick key, a couple of quick keys up here, and then a very slow transition over the course of the rest of our 150 frames here. Okay, so let's go back to our camera. All right, so we've got our exploding letters here, and again we can group these. So come in here and call this explode letters, and we've got our background letters. Okay, I want to make sure that my exploding letters are in front of the background letters. Okay, so something like that. So in the next lesson, what we want to do is to start to have an extrusion that is going to complete this explosion. So we've got the letters, but we want some other sort of random graphic pieces coming out of this as well. So let's take a look at how we can do that in the next lesson.